She looked at me and said, "I'm only staying because it's convenient right now." For years together. And that's what I was to her. So I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't even ask her to explain. I just looked at her and said, "Then it shouldn't be convenient anymore." And that same night, I walked out without any warning. "I'm only staying because it's convenient right now." She said it so casually, like she was talking about a gym membership she hadn't gotten around to canceling yet. Like I was a subscription she forgot was still auto-renewing. Like 4 years meant nothing more than a parking spot she wasn't ready to give up. I remember exactly where I was standing, right in the middle of our kitchen. The overhead light was on, the kind of yellow light that makes everything look a little too honest. I had just finished washing dishes. My hands were still damp. I was reaching for a dish towel when she said it. Just like that. No build-up. No argument leading to it. No fight that exploded into brutal honesty. She said it the way you'd say, "I'm not really hungry tonight." Flat. Unaffected. Almost bored. And I stood there for a moment with a dish towel in my hand and her words sitting in the air between us like smoke that wasn't going anywhere. I turned around slowly. She was leaning against the counter on the other side of the kitchen, her arms crossed, her phone face down beside her. She was looking at me like she was waiting to see what I'd do. Not nervous. Not guilty. Just waiting. And I looked at her. Really looked at her. And I said the only thing that made any sense. "Then it shouldn't be convenient anymore." She blinked. Just once. And I put the dish towel down on the counter, walked to the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag from the closet, and I started packing. That was the last night I spent in that apartment. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next completely changed how I saw everything. Let me back up a little. Not much. Just enough for you to understand what I was walking away from. I was 31 years old. She was 29. We had been together for 4 years, engaged for 7 months. We lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city, her city, not mine. I had moved there 2.5 years earlier because she didn't want to relocate, and I was willing to make that sacrifice. I thought that's what love looked like. I thought choosing someone meant rearranging your life around them. I had a good job, a small circle of people I trusted, and a ring on her finger that I had saved for 6 months to buy. That was the setup. That was what was on the line. Now let me tell you how we got to that kitchen. The first year with Brooke was genuinely good. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She was sharp, funny in a dry way that I loved. And she had this ability to make you feel like the only person in any room she walked into. When Brooke gave you her attention, you felt it. Fully. That was the thing that pulled me in. We met through mutual friends at a birthday party I almost didn't go to. I remember thinking she was intimidating in the best possible way. She knew what she wanted. She was direct. She didn't play games. Or at least, that was the version of Brooke I fell in love with. We moved fast, but it didn't feel reckless. It felt like both of us had been waiting for something specific, and we recognized it in each other. By month 8, we were spending every night together at one of our places. By year 2, she asked me to move in with her. I said yes without hesitating. And I meant it. I left my city, my apartment, my gym, my corner coffee shop, my friends who were a 10-minute drive away. I left all of it. I moved 4 hours north to be with her. And in the beginning, it was worth it. Every single bit of it. The cracks started showing somewhere in year 3. Not explosive cracks. Not the kind you can point to and say, "There, that's where it broke." They were slow cracks. Hairline fractures. The kind that only become visible once the whole structure starts to lean. I started noticing that Brooke had 2 modes with me. There was the Brooke who was present, warm, engaged. The one who texted me back immediately and laughed at my terrible jokes and reached for my hand while we were watching TV. And there was the other Brooke. The one who was somewhere else even when she was sitting right next to me. Distracted. Short with her answers. Physically present, but emotionally checked out. In the beginning, I told myself everyone had off days. Everyone went through phases. Work stress was real. Life was heavy sometimes. I gave her space when she seemed to need it. I checked in without hovering. I tried to be steady. But the off days started becoming the default. And the warm, present Brooke started feeling like the exception. I'd come home after work and she'd barely look up from her phone. I'd suggest we go do something together on weekends. A walk, a drive, trying a new restaurant. And she'd agree with the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to a dentist appointment they couldn't reschedule. I'd reach for her in the evening and she'd shift slightly away without saying anything. Small things. But they add up. They always do. I brought it up for the first time about 14 months after I moved in. I waited until a Sunday morning when she seemed relaxed. Neither of us had anywhere to be, and I sat across from her at the kitchen table, and I said, I feel like something's off between us. Like you're somewhere else a lot of the time. Is everything okay? She put down her coffee. She looked at me, and she said, I'm just stressed about work. You always overthink things. That was it. That was the entire response. And the thing about being told you're overthinking is that it works. At least for a little while. Because there's enough self-doubt in most people that if someone tells you you're reading into something, you start to wonder if maybe you are. So I backed off. I told myself she was probably right. I tried to be more patient. I tried not to make every quiet evening feel like a problem to solve. I genuinely tried. But the problem with dismissing someone's instincts is that the instincts don't go away. They just go underground. And they come back louder. 6 months before she said the convenient thing, I proposed. I had been thinking about it for a long time. And I know what you're probably thinking right now. You're thinking, why would you propose to someone when things already felt off? And that's a fair question. Here's the honest answer. I proposed because I was trying to believe in something. I proposed because I thought maybe what we needed was a forward direction. Something to build toward. Something to make the distance feel temporary instead of permanent. And maybe, somewhere in the back of my head, I thought her saying yes would confirm that I hadn't imagined the connection between us. That I wasn't wrong about her. That I wasn't wrong about us. She said yes. She cried a little. She hugged me for a long time. And for about 3 weeks after the proposal, things were genuinely good again. She was present. She was warm. She was engaged in the way she used to be. And I thought, okay, this was the reset we needed. This is what it looks like when things turn around. I was wrong. 3 weeks after the proposal, the distance came back. Harder this time. Like it had just been on a brief vacation. And something in me shifted. I stopped explaining it away. I stopped telling myself it was work stress or life pressure or my own tendency to overthink. I started paying attention instead. Not in a paranoid way. Not checking her phone or tracking her location or interrogating her about where she'd been. Just observing. Watching the patterns. Noticing what was actually in front of me instead of what I wanted to see. And here's what I noticed. She was bright and energetic when she was going somewhere without me. Dinner with her friend Cassie. She'd spend an hour getting ready. Come out of the bathroom genuinely glowing. Laugh at everything. Be in a great mood the entire evening. Work events, same thing. Anything that took her away from the apartment, away from me. She had energy for it. But when it was just us, flat, tired, somewhere else, I noticed that she stopped asking about my day. Not in a dramatic, overnight way. It just quietly fell off the agenda. I'd come home and talk about something that happened at work, something that was stressing me out or something I was excited about, and she'd nod in the right places. But she wasn't listening. I could tell. She was waiting for the sentence to end so the conversation would be over. I noticed that when I touched her, a hand on her shoulder, an arm around her in the kitchen, she had this micro-reaction. Just the faintest stiffening. Like she was tolerating it. I noticed all of these things, and I said nothing. Because I didn't know yet how to say what I was seeing out loud without sounding like I was accusing her of something she hadn't admitted to. About 2 months before the kitchen conversation, I had a coffee with my friend Adam. He was one of the few people I'd kept close since moving to the city. We'd grown up together, stayed in touch, and he'd made the effort to actually visit me a couple of times since I moved. We were sitting at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, both of us with nowhere urgent to be, and he looked at me at one point and said, "How are things actually going? With Brooke?" And I paused. That pause probably said everything. He waited, and I said, "I don't know, man. I genuinely don't know." He asked me to explain. So I did. I told him about the distance. About the energy she had for everything except us. About the way she'd touch her engagement ring sometimes and have this look on her face that I couldn't quite read. About the proposal feeling like it fixed something for about 3 weeks before the same pattern reasserted itself. Adam listened to all of it without interrupting. And when I was done, he said something I didn't forget. He said, "It sounds like you're already doing the work of trying to hold something together that she's not even showing up to help build." I didn't respond to that right away. I just sat with it. Because he was right. And part of me had known it for a long time. He also said, "Have you told her any of this directly?" Not asking if something's wrong. Actually telling her what you've been noticing and how it's making you feel. I hadn't. Not really. I'd been dancing around it. I'd been asking gentle questions and accepting dismissive answers and backing off when she made me feel like I was creating problems that didn't exist. I hadn't actually looked her in the eye and said, "This is what I see, this is what I feel, and I need you to be honest with me about what's happening." Adam said, "Do that before you make any decisions. Have the real conversation. You owe yourself that. I drove home that afternoon with the intention of finally doing exactly that. The real conversation didn't happen the way I planned it. I came home that evening ready to sit down with her, steady and clear, and just say everything honestly. But she was in a good mood when I got in. Genuinely good. She had ordered food from a place we both loved, the TV was on, she was relaxed on the couch, and she smiled when I walked through the door in a way that reminded me of year one. And I let the moment disarm me. I sat down beside her. We ate. We laughed at something on TV. And I told myself, tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I let it go for another 2 weeks. Which is a thing people do when they love someone and they're scared of what the honest answer might be. The conversation that finally happened wasn't the one I planned. It was the one she started. We had been having a quiet evening, her definition of quiet, which meant she was on her phone and I was reading, and I finally set my book down and said, "Can we talk?" She looked up, and there must have been something in my face, something settled and serious, because she put her phone down immediately and sat up a little straighter. "I need you to be honest with me about something," I said. She didn't say anything. She waited. "Are you happy?" I asked. "With us? With where we are? Are you actually happy?" She was quiet for a moment. Not the guilty kind of quiet. More like she was deciding something. And then she said, "What's bringing this on?" "I've been noticing things for a while," I said. "The distance. The way you light up for everything except being here with me. The way you wear that ring sometimes, and you look, I don't know, uncertain." She uncrossed her legs. She looked at her hands. "I didn't think you'd notice that," she said quietly. And that was the answer, wasn't it? Not, "I don't know what you're talking about." Not, "You're overthinking again." She said she didn't think I'd noticed, which meant she knew exactly what I was describing. "So tell me," I said. "Be honest. What is this for you right now?" And she opened her mouth and closed it, and I watched her run through several versions of whatever she wanted to say before she settled on the one she actually said. "I'm figuring things out," she said. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means I'm not sure about some things." "Which things?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Us," she said. "I'm not sure about us. I want to tell you that I exploded, that I yelled, or slammed something, or stormed out. That would make for a cleaner story. But the truth is that I went very still. The way you go still when your body is registering something before your brain fully catches up." "Okay," I said. "Just that." "Okay. I don't mean forever," she said quickly. "I just mean right now I'm in a place where I'm questioning some things. Like whether you want to marry me," I said. She didn't deny it. "I love you," she said. "I do. I'm just figuring things out." I finished for her. She nodded. I sat there for a moment. And then I asked the question I probably should have asked months earlier. "Is there someone else?" She shook her head. "No, it's nothing like that." "Then what is it?" "I don't know how to explain it," she said. "I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm not sure if I chose this because I wanted it, or because it was the next thing that made sense." That landed somewhere specific in my chest. Because that right there was the core of it. Not someone else. Not a dramatic reason. Just the possibility that I was something that had happened to her life rather than something she had actively, consciously, fully chosen. I asked her one more question. "What do you want to do about it?" And she said, "I think I just need some time to figure out what I actually want." I nodded slowly. I stood up. I said, "Okay, let me know when you do." And I went to bed. And we didn't talk about it again for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence that wasn't really silence. It was the loudest kind of quiet I've ever lived inside. We moved around each other carefully, politely, like two people sharing a waiting room, both waiting for news they were afraid of. She didn't bring it up. I didn't push. We coexisted in a suspended state of something that had been started but not finished. I went to work. I came home. I cooked sometimes. She ordered food sometimes. We watched TV in the same room. We slept in the same bed. And neither of us reached for the other. I want to be clear about something. During those 3 weeks, I wasn't numb. I was grieving. Quietly, privately, but genuinely grieving. Because I already knew, even if I hadn't fully admitted it to myself yet. I knew the way you know things you aren't ready to say out loud. I knew that the version of us I'd hoped for, the one I'd moved cities for, the one I'd saved up and proposed for, the one I had been so patient and steady for, wasn't coming back. If it had ever fully existed at all. And then came the kitchen. It was a Thursday evening. Ordinary in every way. I had gotten home from work, made dinner, we'd eaten mostly in silence, and I was at the sink doing dishes when she came in. She stood near the counter, and I could feel her presence behind me. "I kept washing dishes," she said. I've been thinking about what we talked about. I turned off the water, but I didn't turn around yet. And I said, she paused, and then she said it. I'm only staying because it's convenient right now. I felt the words hit me somewhere behind the sternum. Not like a punch, more like the sound of a door being shut, quietly, but with finality. I set the glass I was holding down in the sink. I dried my hands slowly, and then I turned around. She was standing there with her arms crossed. Her expression wasn't cruel. That was the strange thing. She didn't look cold or dismissive or mean. She just looked like someone who had finally said a thing they'd been carrying around for a while and was relieved to have put it down. Like it was her burden to set aside. Like she hadn't thought about what it would land on. I looked at her for a moment, and I said, then it shouldn't be convenient anymore. She blinked. Once. And I put the dish towel down. I went to the bedroom. I opened the closet. I pulled out the large duffel bag from the top shelf, the one I'd used when I moved in, the one I hadn't touched since because I wasn't planning to go anywhere. I started putting things in it. She appeared in the doorway about 40 seconds later. What are you doing? She said. Packing, I said. I didn't say I wanted you to leave, she said. I know, I said. I was just being honest with you, she said, and there was something almost indignant in her voice, like my reaction was unfair. I stopped for a second. I looked at her. You were honest, I said. And so am I. You told me you're staying because it's convenient. That means the moment it stops being convenient, you're gone. I'm not going to live in a relationship that's one inconvenience away from being over. So I'm making the inconvenience for you. You're welcome. She didn't say anything for a moment. You're overreacting, she said. And I almost laughed. I didn't, but almost. Brooke, I said calmly. You just told your fiancé that the only reason you're still with him is convenience. There's no reaction to that which counts as overreacting. She looked at the duffel bag, then at me. So that's it, she said. For years, and you're just walking out. I didn't decide to end this tonight, I said. You did. You just didn't think I'd hear you when you said it. I zipped the bag. I picked it up. I went to the bathroom and grabbed my essentials, toothbrush, razor, the things I'd need for the next few days. She followed me to the doorway of the bathroom. Where are you going to go? She said. I have options, I said. You're being impulsive, she said. I turned to face her one more time. I've been patient for a year, I said. I've watched you check out of this relationship piece by piece, and I've kept showing up. I've made room for your process and your uncertainty and your need to figure things out. I proposed to a woman who apparently wasn't sure she wanted me to. I moved to a city that is not mine for someone who just told me she's here out of convenience. There is nothing impulsive about this. This is the most deliberate thing I've done in a long time. She was quiet. I walked past her. I put on my jacket. I picked up my keys and my wallet. I looked around the apartment once, and I left. I called Adam on the way to my car. It was almost 9:30 at night. He answered on the second ring. I did the real conversation, I said. And, he said, she told me she was staying because it's convenient. There was a pause. Where are you right now? He said. Parking lot, I said. Come here, he said. I have a couch and I have whiskey and neither of us needs to be anywhere tomorrow until 9. I drove to his place. I sat on his couch. He poured 2 glasses and sat in the chair across from me and said, tell me everything. So I did. And the thing about telling someone everything after you've been holding it alone is that it doesn't feel like relief immediately. It feels like excavation. Like you're pulling things up from somewhere deep that haven't seen light in a long time. I told him about the pattern I'd noticed. The year of small withdrawals. The proposal and the 3 weeks of warmth followed by the return of the distance. The conversation 3 weeks earlier where she'd admitted to being unsure. The 3 weeks of suspended silence. And then tonight. Adam listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, I told you so, even though he'd seen pieces of this coming. When I finished, he just said, how are you actually feeling right now? I thought about it. Relieved, I said. He looked slightly surprised. Yeah, I said. That's the honest answer. I feel like I've been waiting for the floor to drop out from under me for months, and now it has. And there's something about the certainty of it that feels better than the uncertainty. At least now I know. He nodded slowly. The not knowing is worse, he said. Way worse, I said. We sat in silence for a little while. Then he said, what are you going to do about the apartment? Give notice, I said. My name is on the lease too. I'll figure out the logistics. And the ring. I hadn't thought about the ring yet. I hadn't thought about a lot of the practical things yet. One thing at a time, I said. She texted me at 11:17 that night. I was on Adam's couch, trying to wind down, and my phone lit up. The text said, can we please talk tomorrow? I think we both said things in the heat of the moment, and I don't want to make a permanent decision from there. I read it twice, and I thought about the phrase, heat of the moment. I hadn't been heated. I had been absolutely calm. I had washed dishes and dried my hands and packed a bag with the quiet efficiency of someone who had made a decision and was following through on it. There was no heat in my moment. There was just clarity. I put my phone face down and went to sleep. The next day was a Friday. I went to work. I got through the day the way you get through days when something seismic has happened, 1 hour at a time, focusing on the immediate and necessary, not letting yourself look too far ahead or too far back. She called twice. I let both go to voicemail. On my lunch break, I listened to the voicemails. The first one was asking me to come home so we could talk. The second one was asking if I was okay. Not asking if we were going to be okay. Asking if I was okay. I thought that was interesting. Like the relationship was already settled in her mind, and what remained was just concern for me personally. I texted back, I'm fine. I'll be in touch about logistics. She replied immediately, that's all you're going to say? I wrote back, for now, yes. I found a short-term rental that weekend. A furnished studio, month-to-month lease. Nothing impressive. Clean, quiet, functional. It was about 15 minutes from work, and that was all I needed it to be. I moved my essentials out of the apartment on Saturday morning. She wasn't there. I think she left deliberately. I don't know if that was respect for my process or inability to watch it happen. Either way, I was grateful for the empty apartment. I moved quietly and efficiently. I took what was mine. I left everything that was hers exactly as it was. I took the ring I'd given her off the bedside table where she'd left it. I held it for a moment. Then I put it in my jacket pocket and didn't think about it again that day. She sent me a longer message on Sunday. Much longer. I'm not going to reproduce it word for word because some of it was genuinely private and some of it was hers to feel without me dissecting it publicly. But the broad version was this. She said she'd realized, after I left, that she had said something terrible and that she understood why I reacted the way I did. She said she had been in a bad headspace for a long time and she'd been taking it out on the relationship without fully realizing it. She said she did love me and she didn't want things to end like this. She asked if we could please try couples counseling before making any final decisions. I read the whole thing. Twice. And I thought about it carefully. Not coldly. I want to be clear about that. I thought about it genuinely. Because I still loved her. And I want to be honest about that too, because I think people sometimes expect that when a relationship ends badly, you stop loving the person. You don't. At least not immediately. I still loved the person I had moved cities for. I still loved the person I proposed to. But here's the thing I kept coming back to. She had not said the convenient thing in an argument. She hadn't said it in a fight, where emotions are high and mouths run faster than minds. She had said it in a quiet kitchen on an ordinary Thursday evening when we weren't even fighting. She had said it the way you say something you've been thinking for a while. Calmly, clearly, almost with relief. That wasn't heat of the moment. That was truth of the moment. And you can't unring that bell. You can't unhear it. You can apologize for saying it. And maybe she was genuinely sorry, but the thing she apologized for saying was still something she had thought. Still something she had felt. Still a window, however brief, into what was actually happening inside her. And once you've seen through that window, you can't pretend it was never there. I took a few days before I responded to her message. Not to punish her. Not to make her wait on purpose. But because I wanted to be sure that what I said was true and considered and not reactive. When I finally replied, I kept it simple. I told her that I heard her, and I believed she meant what she said in her message. I told her I didn't think she was a bad person. I told her I thought she'd been struggling with something she didn't know how to name, and instead of talking to me about it, she'd let it corrode quietly until it came out the way it did. I told her that I understood that, even if it hurt. And then I told her that I didn't want to do counseling. Not because I was against counseling in principle, but because I felt like we had reached a point where the work of rebuilding would require her to convince me that what she said wasn't true. And I didn't want to be in a relationship where the bar was convincing me that my fiancé actually wanted to be there. That bar should never exist. That bar was the whole problem. I told her I was sorry that things ended this way. I told her I genuinely wished her well. And I told her that I thought we should start the process of separating the shared parts of our lives with as much decency as we could manage. She didn't reply for 2 days. When she did, she said, I understand. I'm sorry. That was all. In the weeks that followed, I found out some things. Not through snooping. Not through mutual friends running me information like it was a competition. Through ordinary conversation, the kind that happens when you're untangling two lives from each other and you end up being more honest than you expected. She had been unhappy for longer than I knew. Not unhappy with me specifically. She was clear about that, and I believe her. But unhappy in a more general, directionless way. A kind of restlessness that she hadn't examined closely enough or traced back to its source. And because the relationship was stable, because I was stable, she had directed her dissatisfaction at us. Because we were the controllable variable. Because I was there. She had a therapist, apparently. Had had one for several months. She told me this when we met once for coffee to sort out the lease. She said the therapist had been helping her see that she had a pattern of reaching a certain point of comfort and security and then sabotaging it. Not out of cruelty. Out of fear. Fear of what? I asked. She thought about it. Of wanting something this much, she said. Of having it and then losing it. I think somewhere in my head, it felt safer to push it away myself than to risk having it fall apart on its own. I sat with that for a moment. So you said something you knew would detonate things, I said. She looked at her coffee cup. I didn't consciously plan it, she said. But I think, yes, maybe. And that was genuinely sad. Not in a way that made me want to take it back, but in a way that made the whole thing feel less like betrayal and more like two people who couldn't quite save something that both of them had cared about. That distinction matters to me. The lease was sorted out. I agreed to remove my name from it, so she could keep the apartment if she wanted. She said she might look for something smaller anyway. We divided the things we'd accumulated together. Not many. We'd mostly kept our possessions separate, with no drama. The ring I kept, at least for a while. Not for sentimental reasons. Just because I didn't know what to do with it yet, and putting it in a drawer felt cleaner than making a decision too fast. I want to talk about what came after. Not the logistics. The actual after. The part that doesn't usually make it into the version of these stories that gets told. The first month in the studio was genuinely hard. Not because I regretted leaving. I didn't. I never once woke up and thought, I made a mistake. But hard for different reasons. Hard because I was in a city that hadn't been mine to begin with. Hard because I'd built my day-to-day life around someone who was no longer in it. Hard because certain hours of the day, the evening ones especially, the ones that used to be ours, felt very empty for a while. I am not someone who has trouble being alone. I genuinely enjoy my own company. But there's a difference between being alone and being where you used to be together. The city still had her in it. The coffee shop we'd gone to on Sunday mornings. The walk we used to take along the waterfront. The Thai place on the corner she'd introduced me to in my first month there. All of it still existed, just without the context it used to have. And for a while, everything felt like a ghost of something. I gave myself permission to sit with that. I didn't try to rush through it or logic my way out of it. I just let it be what it was. Adam was steadier than I had any right to expect from someone with his own life and his own problems. He checked in regularly, not with questions that required me to perform wellness. Just texts that said things like, getting food tonight, you in? Or found a terrible movie that requires a witness. The kind of friendship that doesn't make a big deal out of showing up. I also started running again. I had dropped it sometime in year 2 without fully registering that I dropped it. It used to be something I did every other morning, nothing serious, just enough to feel clear. I picked it back up. And there was something about the early mornings, before the city was fully awake, and the rhythm of it, and the fact that it was entirely and only for me, that started to feel like reclaiming something. Not dramatic. Not therapeutic in a way I could articulate to someone else. Just small and consistent in mine. About 6 weeks after the split, I got a message from Brooke. Not asking for anything. Not trying to reopen things. Just a message that said, I wanted to say something I should have said much sooner. You were a good partner. The best I've had. The problem was never you. I'm sorry it took me this long to see what I was doing clearly. I hope wherever you end up, it's somewhere that's actually yours. I read it on a Wednesday morning, just before a run. I stood in my kitchen, the tiny kitchen of the studio apartment, and I read it 3 times. And then I wrote back, thank you for that. Take care of yourself. And I meant both of those things. I went on my run. And somewhere around the halfway point, in the cold morning air with the city still half asleep around me, I felt something shift. Not dramatically. Not like a movie moment with a swell of music. Just a quiet internal settling. Like something that had been off balance for a long time finally finding level ground. The thing I want to say, and I'm going to say it once and then leave it alone, is this. I don't think Brooke was a villain. I want to be clear about that. I think she was someone who hadn't done the internal work of figuring out what she actually wanted, and she let that uncertainty live inside the relationship instead of outside it. She let me absorb consequences that belonged to her process. That was wrong, but it wasn't malicious. And I don't carry anger about it. What I carry, or what I carried, because it gets lighter, was grief. Grief for the thing I thought we were building. Grief for the city I'd moved to for someone who wasn't fully sure she wanted me there. Grief for the version of this I'd imagined when I put a ring on her finger, but not bitterness. Bitterness requires you to keep feeding it, and I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to maintain that particular appetite. I ended up leaving the city. Not immediately, but after my lease was up, 8 months later, I moved back to my own city, the one I'd left for her. My old corner coffee shop was gone, replaced by a smoothie place I had no interest in, but a lot of other things were still there, including some people I'd been glad to reconnect with. I got an apartment that was mine in a way that felt like mine from the beginning, not decorated to compromise, not arranged around someone else's preferences, just mine. My books, my terrible reading lamp that I'd kept in storage for 2.5 years, my weird collection of used vinyl that she had always tolerated with exasperated affection, all of it back out, all of it taking up space that was actually allocated to it. There is something to be said for a space that's just yours. I'm not saying that as an argument for solitude. I'm saying it as someone who spent years making himself smaller in someone else's space, and then finally had room to take up the square footage he actually occupies. 8 months after leaving, I was at a birthday gathering for a friend of Adam's. Outdoor thing, late summer, string lights over a patio. I wasn't there looking for anything. I wasn't on a mission. I was just there to exist in a normal social situation without thinking too hard about it. And I met someone. Her name was Claire. She worked in environmental law. She had a laugh that was slightly too loud for the setting, and she clearly didn't care. We talked for 2 hours on a corner of the patio, away from the main group, about something that started as mutual analysis of the playlist the host had chosen and turned into a conversation about the nature of decisiveness and whether people actually know what they want or whether they spend most of their lives just reacting to available options. I don't know if she started that conversation with intention or if it just happened, but I remember thinking, somewhere in the middle of it, that it was the first time in a long time that I was talking to someone and not calculating whether they were somewhere else even while standing in front of me. She was just there, fully, in the conversation, interested, asking questions that built on the answers instead of just waiting for a gap to fill. I asked for her number at the end of the evening. She said yes without a pause. That's not the end of the story because life doesn't have clean ends. But it's the point at which I want to close the chapter one started in that kitchen. The chapter about the dish towel and the duffel bag and the sentence that changed everything. Here's what I know now. When someone tells you who they are, listen. I don't mean the version of themselves they show you when things are going well. I mean the version that slips out when they think you're not tracking closely, or the version they reveal in a moment of startling honesty that they immediately wish they could take back. That version is real. Maybe the warmest, most present version is also real. I believe it is. But the truth is that people contain multitudes, and the question is which multitude is steering. When Brooke said, "I'm only staying because it's convenient," she wasn't telling me something invented. She was telling me something true. And the most important thing I did in that moment was listen, not argue, not explain, not try to change her mind or walk it back or negotiate some version of us that could survive what she just said. I listened. And then I honored what I heard by acting accordingly. A lot of people have asked me, or I imagine they would if they were hearing this, whether I regret leaving so quickly, whether I should have given it more of a chance, whether one honest but painful sentence should really be enough to end 4 years. Here's my answer. It wasn't the sentence. It was the year that preceded the sentence. The sentence was just the part that broke the surface. Underneath, it was 12 months of quiet withdrawal and dismissed concerns, and a woman who wore an engagement ring while being uncertain she wanted to be engaged. The sentence just made all of that legible, made it undeniable, made it possible to respond to clearly instead of chasing shadows. I'm grateful she said it. I know that sounds strange, but I am, because it gave me something concrete to respond to. And what I responded with was the truest thing I've said in a long time. Then it shouldn't be convenient anymore. That sentence is mine, and I'd say it again every single time. I'm in a different place now. Different in the literal sense. Different city, different apartment, different life shaped to my own dimensions. And different in the internal sense. I'm less willing to make myself quietly small for someone who isn't sure they want me there. I'm more willing to name what I'm noticing instead of waiting for permission to trust my own observations. I'm better at asking for honesty, and I'm better at staying with the honesty once it arrives rather than flinching away from it. I'm also less afraid of the ending. That's the unexpected one. I used to be the kind of person who would have done almost anything to avoid a relationship ending, because endings felt like failure. I don't believe that anymore. Some endings are the most honest, respectful, clear-eyed thing you can offer someone. Some endings are a gift. The gift of not wasting more of their time or yours on something that has already quietly decided to stop. What I packed into that duffel bag wasn't failure. It was clarity, and I took it with me everywhere I went after. There's one last thing I want to say, and it's for anyone who's been in a similar situation. Not the exact situation. Yours will look different, but the feeling of it. The feeling of noticing something for a long time before you can name it. The feeling of being told you're imagining things that you are very clearly not imagining. The feeling of hanging on longer than you should because you love someone and leaving feels like giving up, and you've never been the kind of person who gives up. Here's what I want you to hear. Staying in something that has stopped choosing you is not loyalty. It's just occupancy. You deserve to be chosen. Actively. Repeatedly. Not tolerated. Not kept around because it's convenient. Not maintained as a placeholder until something better or braver or more certain comes along. You deserve someone who knows, clearly, confidently, without needing to figure it out, that you are worth showing up for. And if the person you're with can't offer you that right now, pack the duffel bag. Quietly. Deliberately. Without anger. Without performance. Without waiting for them to make it easier. Just put the dish towel down and go. I'm not going to tell you how things are going with Claire. Not because I'm being coy, but because that story is still unfolding. And some things deserve to grow in private before you let the world near them. What I'll say is this. She laughs too loud, and she means it. And every time I'm in the same room with her, she's actually in the room. That's enough for now. That's more than enough.